Hey guys, so today we'll be going through a layer 3 switch setup and configuration with an MX. We'll be creating the VLANs on the MS and also setting up the communication correctly between the MS and MX, and I'll show you what it looks like. So let's go ahead. So here is our topology that we have. So you'll have an MX, you'll have a layer 3 switch, and you just have a client that's in one of the VLANs that the layer 3 switch hosts. So we'll be going through a layer 3 switch to MX topology setup, and there's really 4 stages to this setup. So let's go through the first stage. What we will be doing is be creating a management VLAN on the MX. So this will be for the switch to just have default gateway, and in order to reach out and send management traffic to the MX's interface, and then once it reaches the MX, that MX will just send it out to the internet as normal. So this would solely be for the switch to just send its own traffic to the MX. That's it. The next part of setting up a layer 3 switch to MX is to create a transit VLAN. Now this is separate from the management VLAN. So what we'll be doing is we'll be setting the VLAN up on the actual MX, and then we'll be setting it up on the MS. And when we set this up, we'll also be creating a default route to point all traffic that the switch does not know how to route towards the MX's SVI. A point to note here is that this SVI interface and this switch's management interface are different. In a usual Cisco setup, usually you just have this interface for both the transit and the management VLAN of the switches, and that's okay. But in a Cisco Meraki setup, this interface for the management of the layer 3 switch and this SVI interface to route traffic from VLANs that the switch hosts to the MX, it must be different. You can have these in the same VLAN. So for example, I could have placed the SVI for the transit VLAN in this VLAN. So it could have been 192.168.5, let's say .11, for example. But for just clear demonstration purposes, I set the transit VLAN to be totally separate from the management. So just remember that this interface of the layer 3 switch and the SVI used to route traffic from its VLAN to the MX needs to be different. So the next part of setting up is to actually, of course, create the VLANs on the switch. So we'll be going through that, and that should be a fairly simple process in Dashboard. And the final step that we'll be doing is we will be creating static routes on the MX to tell the MX how to reach the VLANs over here hosted on the layer 3 switch, and I'll show you how to do that. If you don't set that up, then traffic will go from the layer 3 switch to the MX. The MX will send it out to the internet fine, but then when it comes back, the MX is not going to know how to route, let's say, the sales VLAN traffic back towards the layer 3 switch. So we're going to be setting up these MX static routes. So let's go ahead in Dashboard and let's configure these 4 stages. So here we are in our Cisco Meraki dashboard, and we're going to be going through the first stage of setting up our management VLAN on the MX. So you just go into security and SD-WAN, you click into addressing and VLANs, and here is the page, and then you just scroll down and let's add that VLAN. So you got a management VLAN, and then the VLAN ID is going to be number 5. We'll keep the defaults and click next. We'll disable IPv6 config, we don't need that right now. And let's go ahead and create our interface IP. So that's 172.16.5.1. And the subnet, which is the subnet over here, it's going to be 172.16.5.0/24. And then we're just going to go ahead and click preview, and that all looks to be okay. And then we're just going to click update and click save, and that should eventually load. There we go. So here we are. If I scroll down now, and there is the management VLAN we have created. So what we're going to be doing now is we're going to be creating our transit VLAN on the MX, and then after we'll just head over to the switch and also create the transit VLAN. So let's go ahead and create the transit VLAN, which is stage 2. So let's just add the VLAN, and let's do the transit. Let's call it transit, and the VLAN ID is going to be 10. We keep the default, we disable the IPv6 config, and we're just going to create 192.168.10.1, and it will be 192.168.10.0/24. So this is going to be our transit VLAN, so that the switch can send traffic from its own VLANs to this interface for the MX to route to the internet. So let's just click update and click save. Okay, I'm going to scroll down, and now we have a good setup. So we have the management VLAN and we have our transit VLAN completed. So stage 1 and 2, that's all done, and that's all the MX configuration for now. So let's go ahead over to our switch and configure the transit VLAN, and also after that then we can configure its VLANs as well. So let's go over to the MS and configure that. So here we are under the switching, routing and DHCP page. Now we're going to be doing stage 2, which is creating the transit VLAN on the MS switch. So let's go ahead and do that. So let's create the interface. We'll call it transit over here. The VLAN ID will be 10. The subnet will be 192.168.10.0/24. Now the interface IP is over here, which is 192.168.10.254. I did mention that this IP over here has to be separate from the IP address on our switch. So if I go here, and then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to refresh this page, and essentially this IP here cannot be the same as the IP that you're setting in here. It works with Cisco, but it won't work with Cisco Meraki. You'll get issues. So just make sure that that's not the case. So the default gateway now is what we're going to be setting up here, which is our default route. So we're going to be pointing to the SVI of our MX. So all traffic that the switch doesn't know how to route is just going to send it to the MX. So let's put that in, 192.168.10.1. And let's go ahead and click save on that. So that's essentially our transit VLAN setup, and we have our static route setup. So we're going to move over now to stage 3, where we set up the sales VLAN and the finance VLAN, and this will be for obviously users. So let's go ahead and do that. Now this is part 3. So sales, the VLAN ID is number 2. The subnet is 192.168.20.0/24. The interface IP is 192.168.20.1. And let's just go ahead and save that. Let's add the finance VLAN. So that's finance. The VLAN ID will be number 3. 192.168.30.0/24, and then 192.168.30.1. Okay, so that is pretty much what it looks like. So we have our transit VLAN here, and we have our sales and our finance VLAN. So this interface is what the interface that the layer 3 switch will use to communicate from the layer 3 switch over to the MX. So what we'll do is I just want to show you guys, so before we move over to step 4, which is our next step, we're going to be creating a static route. So on the MX, we'll be creating basically static routes to tell the MX, in order to reach these two VLANs, you're just going to forward the traffic to this SVI, so this next hop, which is the layer 3 switch interface. So what's going to happen at the moment is the sales and the finance VLAN won't be able to get out to the internet. So let me just demonstrate that in our Meraki dashboard. So if I just go over to our switch, I refresh, and then if we click here, and then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to select the source interface to be our sales VLAN, and I'm just going to ping 1.1.1.1. At the moment it won't work. Eventually that should show loss, and what's happening is the switch is sending the traffic up towards the MX. The MX sends it fine to the internet, and then the traffic comes back. Now the MX doesn't know where to send the traffic, so what it's going to do is it's just going to drop it. So that's why step 4 is essentially going to fix that problem. So it's going to say, okay, if you get traffic sent from the sales VLAN, take that traffic and send it over to this interface, which sits on our layer 3 switch downstream. So let's go ahead over to the address and VLANs page and configure that. So here we are under the security and SD-WAN addressing and VLANs page. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to scroll down, and I have the static routes here. So what we're going to be doing is the part 4, where we just create these two static routes over here in order to point the MX in the right direction to send the traffic for these VLANs over to this interface here. Some people sometimes mistake it to send traffic down to the actual SVIs for the VLANs themselves, which is not correct. So let's go ahead and do that. So let's create the static route for the sales. So 192.168.20.0/24, and the next hop IP will be 192.168.10.10.254. So it's this SVI here of the transit VLAN, not the sales SVI. So essentially what this does is, like I said, it's telling the MX, in order to reach this sales subnet VLAN, go to send your traffic to this interface here. So let's just click save, and then once that's done, I'll just go ahead and do the finance one. So let's scroll down and add a static route for finance. 192.168.30.0/24. Go to 192.168.10.254. So again, in order to get to this subnet, go to this interface. And that's pretty much all of our setup done for a layer 3 switch to an MX setup. So now that's set up, the static routes are done, that's the final stage, which is stage 4. Let's go over to our switch, and let's see if I can now ping from the switch, from the VLAN interface of sales. So let's go over to the tools page, and let's try to ping out to the internet using our sales VLAN SVI. There you go. So now the sales VLAN SVI is able to ping out to the internet. So what it's doing is, when you ping from this SVI, it goes to this SVI, the switch sends it up to the MX's SVI over here, it goes out to the internet over here, it comes back, and then from this MX SVI here, it just sends it back down to this interface here. So I hope this has been helpful, and I'd like to thank you very much for watching.